We received the Philanthropic Family of the Year award from our city's community foundation last spring. I stood on that stage, my cousin David beaming beside me, and gave a speech about my grandmother's vision, about lifting up strangers, about the power of education to change a life. The audience gave us a standing ovation. I smiled, I waved, I accepted the heavy crystal plaque. And the entire time, the envelope in my inside jacket pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. Because inside that envelope was a single sheet of paper. A list of names. And that list proved the scholarship fund we were being celebrated for wasn't helping strangers change their lives. It was a private, tax-free trust fund for David's children. My grandmother's legacy had been hollowed out, turned into a lie, and I was the one holding the proof, while everyone applauded the fraud. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the kind of woman who built things that lasted. She built a life out of nothing. She built a small business that supported our whole family, and most importantly to her, she built a reputation on integrity. She came from a time where your word and your name were your most valuable currency. When she passed away 15 years ago, she left a specific, almost poetic instruction in her will. A portion of her estate, $250,000, was to be used to create the Eleanor Bright Future Scholarship. The language was clear. It was for deserving students in our community who demonstrate exceptional drive but face significant financial hardship. The key word was our community. It was never meant to be just for us. The family appointed David as the fund's trustee. It made sense on paper. He was a financial advisor. He was organized. He was charming and well-connected in town. He was my cousin, my father's brother's son. We grew up together, spent summers at the same lake house. He was family. For years, it seemed to run smoothly. Every Thanksgiving, David would give a little update. Awarded 2 scholarships this year, he'd say, raising a glass. Helping kids become engineers, teachers. Grandma would be proud. And we'd all nod, feeling a warm glow. We were continuing her work. We were a good family. David was the diligent steward making it happen. He sent out the official-looking annual letters with the fund's letterhead, showing a modest, responsible growth of the principal and listing the yearly disbursements. The names of the recipients were always just that, names. Emma Johnson, Michael Chun, Sarah Miller. They sounded legitimate. They felt legitimate. We had no reason to doubt. Doubting David would have felt like doubting family itself, like doubting the very memory of my grandmother. So we praised him. We called him the keeper of Grandma's flame. And he accepted the role with quiet, humble grace. The hypocrisy was so perfect, so complete, it was invisible. The first crack appeared not with a bang, but with a quiet, persistent email. It was from a young woman named Chloe. Her email was polite, well-written, but you could feel the desperation vibrating through the words. She was a first-generation college student, working 2 jobs, maintaining a near-perfect GPA in pre-med. She'd applied for the Eleanor Bright Future Scholarship. Her application, she believed, was strong. More than strong. It was exactly what my grandmother had described. Drive. Hardship. Promise. She'd been denied. The rejection letter was a generic form letter. But Chloe wasn't the type to accept a generic no. She did some digging. She looked at the fund's publicly available 990 tax forms, the ones nonprofits have to file. And she noticed something odd. Over the past decade, a startling pattern emerged in the list of grant recipients. She didn't accuse. She just asked. Her email to the general family address we had listed ended with a simple, devastating question. I noticed many past awardees share a surname with a trustee. Is the scholarship primarily for relatives? I just want to understand the criteria so I can apply more effectively in the future if applicable. I read that email late on a Tuesday night, and my blood went cold. It wasn't anger at first. It was a dizzying, vertigo-like confusion. It couldn't be. Chloe must have misread. David wouldn't. He couldn't. I pulled up the 990 forms myself. They were dry, complex documents, full of legalese and numbers. But the list of grants was there in black and white. For the first 5 years, the names seemed normal. Then, around year 6, I saw it. Catherine Davies. Davies was David's wife's maiden name. A coincidence, I told myself. A common name. The next year, Thomas Davies. My heart started to thud against my ribs. Year 8, Eleanor Davies. They'd named their daughter after my grandmother. And they'd paid for her private school tuition with my grandmother's scholarship fund. I scrolled faster, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard. Robert Davies. A nephew. Jennifer Davies Hill. A niece. It was a damning pattern, hidden in plain sight within the boring bureaucracy of a tax form. 80%. Chloe's estimate was conservative. It was a closed circuit. The money went out, circled through the family, and the principal, managed by David's firm, of course, generated fees that went right back into his pocket. I confronted him, but not with fury. I was careful. I called it a confusing discrepancy. I played dumb. Hey David, I was just looking at the old tax stuff for the fund. Got curious after this applicant reached out. I keep seeing the Davies name pop up. Are these relatives of yours getting the scholarship? The silence on the other end of the phone was thick enough to choke on. Then, the smooth, practiced explanation clicked into gear.
Oh, that.
Yes, of course. Look, the fund's criteria says community. We interpret that broadly. Family is part of our community. And these kids are deserving. Tommy Davies worked so hard to get into state. We're helping family, which is what Grandma would have wanted. It's about strengthening the whole family tree. He made it sound noble, a reinterpretation of the rules, a compassionate bending. But I heard the lie. I heard the sleight of hand. Helping those who strive had become helping those who share your DNA. The scholarship wasn't a ladder for strangers. It was a safety net for his own, paid for with a dead woman's money and a family's gullibility. That conversation was the end of my trust, but it was only the beginning of my investigation. David's calm justification was more terrifying than a guilty outburst. It meant he'd thought about this. He'd rationalized it. He'd built a story where he was still the good guy. I couldn't let it go. I hired a forensic accountant, a discreet woman named Linda, who specialized in nonprofit fraud. I didn't tell another soul in the family. This was between me, David, and Grandma Eleanor's ghost. Linda's audit was clinical and brutal. She didn't deal in feelings, only in transactions. And the transactions told a story of breathtaking, systematic theft. The modest growth David reported? It was a fraction of the fund's actual performance. The difference was siphoned off as investment management fees to his firm, fees triple the industry standard. The scholarship payments themselves were often duplicated. A $10,000 disbursement to Eleanor Davies for university tuition would be followed by a $10,000 transfer from David's personal account to the same university payment portal. He was using the fund's money, then reimbursing it with his own, likely to create a paper trail showing the scholarship was real, while keeping the fund's capital for other uses.
It was a shell game.
The most gut-punching discovery was the timing. The fraud hadn't started slowly. It began almost immediately. The second year of the fund, when we were all still raw with grief and trusting him completely, he'd paid his eldest son's full-year private high school tuition. My grandmother's money, meant to give a struggling kid a chance, had bought a BMW for the headmaster's parking lot at an elite academy. Linda compiled everything into a report. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a business plan. This was when the raw anger set in. It wasn't hot and screaming. It was cold, heavy, and metallic. It was the weight of that Crystal Award we didn't deserve. It was the sound of Chloe's hopeful email hitting a wall of familial greed. I had the proof. The unassailable, numbers don't lie proof. And I faced the real dilemma. This wasn't just about David. Exposing him would blow up the entire family. It would shatter the carefully curated image we'd all benefited from. It would turn a philanthropic family into a town scandal. It would tarnish my grandmother's name, the very thing I wanted to protect. David knew this. His entire scheme was built on this unspoken blackmail. You won't expose me, because to expose me is to expose all of us. You are complicit in the silence that I didn't go to the law. Not first. I went to the source. I asked Linda the accountant to calculate a number, the total amount misappropriated, plus estimated lost growth, plus the illegal fees. It was a staggering sum. Then I called a family meeting. Not the whole extended clan. Just the core group, my siblings, David and his wife, and a few key aunts and uncles. I didn't bring the full forensic report. I brought two things. The first was a copy of my grandmother's will, the paragraph about the scholarship highlighted. The second was a single sheet of paper, the list of scholarship recipients from the 990 forms, with every Davies name circled in red. I laid them side by side on the dining table, the same table where we'd had so many Thanksgivings. The room was quiet. For 15 years, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, we've been living a lie. We've been praising David for managing a charity that doesn't exist. Grandma's legacy isn't helping strangers. It's been a piggy bank for one branch of this family. Here is the will. Here is the reality. I slid the paper toward David. He didn't look at it. He looked at me, his face a mask of wounded pride. This is a witch hunt, he started. But one of my aunts, a retired school teacher, picked up the paper.
Her eyes scanned the list.
She saw her own granddaughter's name, a Davies through marriage, listed for a study abroad scholarship the girl had never mentioned. The color drained from her face. David was all she could whisper. The dam broke. Not with yelling, but with a slow, sickening realization spreading around the room. I presented my ultimatum, not as a threat, but as the only path to salvaging our grandmother's name. David would immediately resign as trustee. He and his immediate family would sign a legally binding promissory note to repay every misappropriated dollar, with interest, into the fund over 10 years. The fund would be placed under the control of a professional, independent community foundation with a clear, public criteria. And we, as a family, would anonymously match the repaid amount to create a new, need-based grant in our city. There would be no police report, for the family's sake and for Grandma's reputation. But there would be full, private financial restitution and a permanent loss of standing. David had a choice: agree to these terms in front of everyone, or I would file the accountant's report with the State Attorney General's Charity Division and the IRS the next morning. He chose to repay. The Philanthropic Family of the Year award sits in a box in my basement now. The real award, the one that matters, is the first genuine scholarship we awarded last month. It went to Chloe, the young woman who had the courage to ask a question. Her email was the thread I pulled, and it unraveled an entire tapestry of lies. My grandmother's legacy is finally, truly beginning. This story isn't about one corrupt cousin. It's about the silent complicity that allows family fraud to thrive. How would you have handled it? Would you have taken the quieter path of forced restitution like I did, or would you have gone straight to the authorities? Scandal be damned? There's no easy answer. Debate your choice in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, share it. Share it not for the drama, but for the message. Transparency isn't distrust. It's the only way to honor a legacy. If you have a family trust, a shared fund, or even just a collection of heirlooms, ask the hard questions. Look at the statements. The biggest betrayals often hide behind the most trusted names.